Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Meltem Karataş. I work as a postdoctoral researcher at Boğaziçi University and I will be presenting an overview of research ethics in biomedical sciences. This work is supported by the European Union under the TACTIX project. Let's dive in. To start, we need to clearly define what we mean by ethics. Simply put, ethics are the norms for conduct that help us distinguish between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. It is how we navigate right versus wrong. While most laws enforce widely accepted moral standards, ethics and law are not the same thing. Ethical norms tend to be broader and more informal. It is also important to recognize that different disciplines, institutions, and professions such as medicine, law, engineering, or business, have different ethical standards tailored for their specific challenges. So, how does this apply to research specifically, and why is it so critical to our daily work? To understand our current protocols, we have to look at the history of bioethics. A major milestone is the Declaration of Helsinki. It was developed by the World Medical Association in 1964, and it provides the global ethical guidelines necessary to protect human research subjects. It is a living document and has seen several amended versions over the years, with the most recent update in 2024. In 1979, we saw the introduction of the Belmont Report, which became the cornerstone of bioethics in the US. It established three fundamental principles. First, respect for persons or autonomy, ensuring participants provide free, informed consent that can be withdrawn at any time without penalty during research. Second, beneficence and non-maleficence, which means maximizing potential benefits while minimizing harm. Research should only proceed if the risks are proportional to the benefits or benefits outweigh the risks. And third, justice, ensuring a fair distribution of research benefits and burdens, and specifically preventing discriminatory selection of participants. Moving to Europe, the 1997 Oviedo Convention on Human Rights and Biomedicine by the Council of Europe was created to prevent the misuse of biomedical advancements and protect individual integrity, dignity, and identity. It has established key prohibitions such as choosing a future child's sex, creating human embryos for research, and making heritable modifications to the human genome, which are all prohibited under this convention. It also forced us to confront complex dilemmas around organ donation, like who gets an organ when there is a shortage? What are the differences between living and deceased donors with respect to consent? And this strict prohibition of financial gain from body parts. And it also raises the philosophical question: just because we have the technical means to prolong life, should we always use them? It also addressed medically assisted procreation, tackling issues regarding IVF, the fate of frozen embryos, and the definition of natural reproductive limits. Again, just because we have the technical means, should we always use them? Finally, it sets frameworks for genetic testing, weighing predictive health information against the risks of discrimination and psychological impact, and strictly prohibited human cloning to protect human dignity. Today, our work is heavily guided by several codes and guidelines by different institutions, including the 2023 European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity, published by all European academies, which outlines the professional, ethical, and legal responsibilities of researchers across all fields. This framework is built on 4 core principles. First, reliability, ensuring research quality through rigorous design, methodology, and analysis. Second, honesty, maintaining transparency and fairness in developing, reviewing, and communicating research. Third, respect for our colleagues, participants, society, and the environment at large. And fourth, accountability, taking absolute responsibility for the research process from its inception to publication, and ultimately its societal impact. Putting this code into practice requires adhering to good research principles. This starts with our research environment, fostering a culture of integrity, mutual respect, and an infrastructure that actually supports reproducibility and traceability. It also demands rigorous training and mentoring, both in terms of scientific methodology and research ethics. A huge part of this infrastructure is data management. We must adhere to FAIR principles, being findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So our metadata and data must be findable for both humans and computers. It must be accessible, potentially requiring authentication or authorization mechanisms. It also has to be interoperable, which means it can be integrated with other data or other workflows for analysis. Finally, it must be reusable, meaning it is well described enough to be replicated or combined in different settings. Furthermore, good principles extend to publication and authorship. Authorship must be based on significant intellectual contribution, and all authors have to take responsibility for the work. Importantly, even negative results or results that are contrasting with the initial hypothesis must be acknowledged. In collaborations, partners must agree on expectations, goals, and the procedures for handling any potential misconduct from the very beginning. When these principles fail, we encounter the violations of research integrity. The most severe offenses are, of course, the fabrication, which is simply making up data that does not exist, falsification, which is manipulating materials or results, and plagiarism, which is using others' work without any proper credit. But there are other unacceptable practices that are unfortunately very common. These include salami slicing, where research that should form one meaningful paper is divided into several smaller ones. It also includes hiding the use of AI or automated tools, selective citing to bias a narrative, and finally establishing predatory journals that undermine overall research quality. Dealing with these violations requires a strong partnership between researchers, institutions, and sponsoring agencies. The process involves fair, comprehensive investigations that maintain the presumption of innocence, alongside strict protection for whistleblowers and absolute confidentiality. The standard procedures move through 5 steps. First, reporting of the allegations, an initial assessment or inquiry, a formal investigation, adjudication or corrective action, and finally, if it's needed, appeals and restoration for the researchers. To navigate all of this, the Council of Europe provides vital resources, including the European Charter for Researchers, the Code of Conduct for the recruitment of researchers, and specific guides for Research Ethics Committee members. And that brings us to the oversight bodies themselves, the Research Ethics Committees or the Institutional Review Boards. These are independent, multidisciplinary groups tasked with reviewing our research protocols to protect the dignity, rights, safety, and well-being of human participants, as well as the rights of animals used for experiments. To ensure they are effective, these committees rely on multidisciplinary expertise combining scientists, healthcare professionals, lawyers, and ethics experts. Crucially, they also include the lay representation, which are members with no specific scientific qualifications to ensure the public perspective is heard. And these committees must operate with total independence, free from political, institutional, or market influences, and members are strictly required to declare any conflicts of interest. The roles and responsibilities of the research ethics committees span the entire life cycle of a project. In the pre-research review, they evaluate the scientific quality and the risk-benefit ratio to ensure proposals are sound and ethically acceptable. During ongoing monitoring, they follow up on active research to see if new developments require protocol changes or discontinuation of research. And in post-research oversight, they ensure researchers fulfill their obligations, like sharing results understandably and disclosing individual health-related findings. These committees oversee three main areas: human subjects research, animal research, and biosafety. For animals, an institutional animal care and use committee must approve detailed proposals, ensuring researchers minimize animal numbers and any stress or harm to the animals. For biosafety, institutional biosafety committees oversee the use of microbiological agents or recombinant DNA. Let's focus closely on animal research ethics. Historically, we have seen a gradual and necessary shift from viewing animals merely as tools for human benefit to recognizing them as sentient beings requiring legal and moral protection. Animal research ethics is concerned with ensuring the humane care and treatment of animals, treating them with respect in accordance with both ethical and legal provisions. This started with the UK's Cruelty to Animals Act in 1876, the world's first legislation to regulate animal testing, which required researchers to be licensed and use anesthesia wherever possible. By the 20th century, formalization of research ethics dictated that human trials absolutely must be preceded by rigorous animal testing. Today, our framework is governed by the 3 R's, first introduced by Russell and Birch. These include the reduction, minimizing the number of animals used; refinement, modifying techniques to reduce pain and distress to the animals; and replacement, substituting conscious, living, higher animals with either a lower species or insentient materials whenever possible. These principles are now backed with strict legislation. The US Animal Welfare Act of 1966 set minimum standards for handling and housing and created the institutional animal research boards. In Europe, EU directive has the ultimate goal of completely phasing out animal procedures, enforcing strict severity classifications, mandatory harm-benefit analyses, and retrospective assessments. Organizations like FELESA provide vital guidelines and training accreditation to support these goals. Because of these directives, we have seen massive changes like the 2013 EU ban on cosmetics testing on animals. We are increasingly moving towards non-animal alternative methods, which include in vitro cell cultures, in silico computer modeling, and advanced organ-on-a-chip technologies. Finally, I want to leave you with a practical overview of how to structure an ethics application for a research project. Step 1 is, of course, the project description. You must provide a clear description of your scientific question, motivation, and detailed objectives. Step 2 is data and methodology justification. You should detail your specific methodologies, justify why they are necessary, reference your data management plan, and explain how your methods allow for reproducibility. Of course, all with proper citations to the literature. Step 3 is establishing consent and welfare protocols. For human data, detail how you will obtain freely given informed consent. And for animal subjects, detail the welfare protocols and firmly justify the ethical necessity adhering to the 3 Rs. Step 4 is privacy and security planning. You must document exactly how sensitive personal data or proprietary research will be kept secure. And step 5 is assessing risks. Identify any personal, societal, and environmental risks involved and outline the specific measures you have in place to mitigate them. This is the end of my presentation. I thank you for your time and attention.